Hello, bonjour, welcome. My name is Nicole Fontaine, Business Development Officer at the World Trade Center, Winnipeg. I would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that this webinar is coming to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the First Nations and the homeland of the Métis. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this new webinar, Creating a Culture of Innovation, presented in partnership with the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce.
Morning, everyone. As Nicole mentioned, my name is Rielle Bailey. I'm the Program and Events Manager with the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for being here today. I have the honor of presenting our speaker today, Theo Heineman, who is the founder and CEO of One Life Workplace Safety Solutions. She is the Entrepreneur of the Year, Canadian Safety Leader of the Year finalist, and Safety ROI coach to high-performing business leaders. She's a certified NeuroChangeSolutions consultant, personally trained by leading neuroscientist and New York Times bestselling author, Dr. Joe Dispenza. And Theo, off to you. Thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thank you to you all for attending. Thank you to Rielle, Katie, Nicole, all of you that have facilitated this. Big thanks to the World Trade Center Winnipeg and the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce for being able to spend some time with you. My topic today is creating a culture of innovation, as we talked about, and I'm really pleased to share with you. I know time is the most valuable resource that we have, and I'm going to do my very best to make this time the most high value I possibly can. Now more than ever, a safe and healthy workforce can truly be our greatest driver of overall business performance. And I'm not just speaking to you today from theory, I'm speaking to you from personal experience. So if you are a business leader, you're going to get helpful information here as far as what we can do in our businesses to foster innovation. If you are not a leader, you're working in the business, you are in any way working in any of the great organizations in our province, our city, it's also going to be applicable to you because now more than ever, many of us have to be innovating. Some of us were innovating new jobs. We're innovating how we run our whole households through COVID. So these are unprecedented times for people. One of the greatest stressors in life is the unknown, and we're all in the unknown. So my deep desire is if I can share anything that I've learned experientially that would help you and support you to lead your businesses better, or lead your families better, or lead yourself in a more graceful, beautiful way, then that's my intention today. I didn't know this, what I'm about to teach you or what I'm about to share with you. I always say, live life as though life is rigged in your favor. This is a picture of me with my sister. She was my director of finance and admin here at One Life for 5 years. She was diagnosed with stage 4 non-operable pancreatic cancer. The surgeon was crying as he was telling her that there was nothing they could do. And you know, with pancreatic cancer, it's probably the most lethal, if not one of the most lethal, if not the most lethal cancers. So with, that kind of diagnosis, you have maybe, a few months at best. And the long story short is 2 years later, she was no longer stage 4, she was stage 3. She was doing amazing. She was the miracle worker. She was, she also didn't follow directions. She didn't follow instructions. She did pass away, unfortunately, but it was not because of cancer, it was because of an infection. Why is this relevant? It's because when we were faced with that kind of a obstacle, sometimes when our back is against the wall, that's when we stop arguing for our limitations and we start exploring new possibilities. And it was through her journey of trying to figure out how to get her body to start to heal itself that we started to learn about neuroscience and the power of our nervous system. So neuroscience just means the power of the brain and the nervous system. And so that's what she started to understand, to start to turn her body around. And what I also learned in my experience from a business point of view, the same principles that it takes for us to be healthy in our human body is the same thing it takes for us to be healthy and successful in any other part of life. And if we want to be innovating in our life or in business, it's critical what I'm going to share with you today. We really need to understand how we actually operate as human beings. And so it's a deep honor to be with you, because through this presentation, she lives on, and her life was not in vain, and she wanted to help a lot of people. So she's doing that today. So what I'm going to share with you here is research-based. And, you know, I will always say, don't believe anything I say. I think now more than ever, we have to be doing our own research. We have to be doing our own critical thinking. I want to share with you what I have learned from my experience. It's only my experience. Take what resonates with you and leave the rest. But I can tell you it's completely transformed my business and my life. What I'm going to share with you is a lot from the HeartMath Institute. They are a 30-year-old independent research organization. Dr. Joe Dispenza's work is based on 8,000 brain scans, 6,000 heart scans. This is hard science now. This is no longer mumbo jumbo that's hyperbole. This is now becoming so deeply understood because there's so much research on what I'm going to share with you. Einstein, he said, we cannot solve our problems with the same mind that created them. And I never really understood what that meant, but he means this literally. Like, we literally cannot solve our problems with the same mind that created them. There's a certain level of mind, there's a certain level of awareness of consciousness that creates an experience. And with that same level of consciousness, we cannot uncreate it. And in fact, I would have a question for you all. If you want to create anything new, is it going to come from your future, or is it going to come from your past? Well, anything that's in our past, we already know, right? If we have a problem to solve and all we're drawing on is our experiences, what we've learned, anything anybody else has learned, it all comes from our past. And if we're trying to solve problems from our current experiences based on our past, how can we really create anything new? Right? And I just want to start to plant some seeds of some of the concepts I want to share with you. So you look at anybody who's innovated, you know, whether we're going to put a man on the moon, etc. You know, people could not be thinking from the level of mind of the past. They had to be thinking in an unknown future. And in fact, most people were ridiculed and called a fool as they were innovating, because people don't like change so much. People are so afraid of change, right? We have an amygdala in our brain that likes safety. It likes the known. It doesn't like change. So let's talk about emotions for just a moment. Emotions also have a big effect on how we think. They have a very large effect about whether we're living in the past or we can actually live in the future, whether we can innovate or whether we are stuck in the same old rut. Also, our emotions are our primary driver of our physiology. So that is now becoming a fact as well. Our emotions are a primary driver of our physiology. I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. But my question to you is, and if you can put in the chat, it would be kind of fun. Hopefully we can have a little dialogue here. As you look at all of these emotions, what would be your primary emotion, would you say? Are you always in joy? Are you more in apathy, in fear, in worry, frustration, guilt? If you're able to type in the chat, that would be super awesome. Or even just think for yourself, where am I mostly? Where are my emotions mostly? Courage, somebody said courage, that's awesome. Okay, I think a lot of people are in fear right now. Some people are in apathy. A lot of people are in worry. Some people are in frustration, right? There's people that are happy as well. But the fact is, we think as human beings, we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And 90% of our thoughts are the same thoughts as we had yesterday. And they're mostly negative. So when we really look at it, we think the same thoughts repeatedly over and over again. right? And especially in today's day and age, could be job issues, family issues. Maybe we've got young kids at home having homeschooling, etc. And these are mostly stressful thoughts, right? Those negative thoughts are stressful thoughts. And most of the time, people are living in the stress response 70% of the time. And living in stress is living in survival. So I'm going to pick up the pace here, just because I know I've got a lot to share with you. So living in the stress response is living in survival. And so if you take, for example, a zebra that's grazing in the Serengeti, all of its energy is in the core of its body when it's grazing. Its parasympathetic nervous system is engaged. It's digesting its food. It's repairing its tissues in its body. Could be growing a little baby zebra in its body. And this body's in balance, homeostasis. It's in rest and repair. All of a sudden, it gets wind of a predator in its external environment, and very quickly it switches on its sympathetic nervous system. Everything changes. All of the energy leaves the core of the body, all those vital organs, and it's transferred out to the extremities. Why? So it can run. So the blood pressure increases, those vessels constrict, the eyes dilate, etc. And this massive amount of energy is moved, as I said, into the extremities so that it can actually run, fight, or hide, right? And in nature, the stress response is not a bad thing. It's a protective mechanism, but it's intended to last for a short period of time. So in nature, this is going to last maybe for 15 or 30 minutes. After that time, either the zebra has become dinner or it's outrun the predator. So if it's outrun the predator, its body's going to calm down. It's going to go back into homeostasis, back into balance. Human beings, because of the size of our neocortex, we have the ability to turn on the stress response just by thought alone. So just by our thoughts, we can turn on that stress response. And how many of you have thought about this? If you think of, every month or so, people are being called to the office and let go. And you hear somebody being called to the office and you think, is it me going to be let go today? Do you not remember? Can you not even feel in this moment what it feels like? Your blood pressure increases, you get this flush all over your body. Just a thought can create stress in the body. And so we as human beings are living in this stress response about 70% of the time. Internet connections, traffic jams, etc. And when we're living in that stress response, it creates incoherence in our brain and in our between our brain and our heart. So if you see the red line, this is the heart activity. If you see the blue line here, this is the brain activity. And so this is like stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. This is like a symphony playing all out of time. So we are these extraordinary creatures, and the heart and brain are meant to be in sync, not incoherent. And so this would be very much like having 8 rowers in a boat, and they're all rowing out of time. They're all splashing and rowing out of time. Is that going to be efficient? No. Is that going to take far more energy? Yes. Right? You think about that zebra that's being chased by the lion. That's meant to go on for, as we said, 15 or 30 minutes. So what happens if it goes on for, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months, 3 years? That's obviously not even possible because that animal's going to wear out. So human beings are in the stress response constantly. This is even before COVID. Now that we are in COVID, it's even more exaggerated. And by the way, living in the stress response down regulates the immune system. And if you don't believe that, go and do your research on what they give people when they're doing organ transplants. So when they do organ transplants, they will often give the patient a dose of stress hormone to actually suppress the immune system so that that person's body is more likely to accept the organ. So when we're in this constant stress, fear of the unknown, fear of the third wave, fear of the variant, all this fear, it is causing people to not only downregulate their immune system, but we'll talk more, it's causing their intelligence to drop. And you certainly will not have a culture of innovation. You certainly will not be able to innovate in your personal life. It's actually the complete opposite. And now is the time for us really to understand how this works, because we have control over this. We control what we put in our minds. We control, what we let our body be exposed to some extent. And I really want to share that with you. So our heart rhythms affect our physical and mental performance. So when we're in stress, that heart beats incoherently. You can actually measure this. You can buy gadgets from the HeartMath Institute. There's other places you can buy them from. You can actually measure your heart-brain coherence. What's not widely known is the heart actually sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. That is a fact. And so it's really important, as these marvels of creation that we are, that heart is incredibly powerful. They both have electromagnetic fields, the brain and the heart, and they need to be in sync for optimal productivity, optimal thought, optimal foresight, optimal creativity, and optimal innovation. In the absence of that, so if we're frustrated, irritated, impatient, we're worrying, that disruption really affects how the brain works. It affects, and I'll show you maybe in a moment a better picture. When we are in emotions of appreciation, calm, patience, confidence, that actually facilitates brain function. It facilitates that heart-brain coherence, and the messages, the signals being sent between the heart and the brain are more effective. And when our brain is working better, we're working better. So here's what's so alarming and yet so astounding to become aware of. So let's say I'm an angry person. Let's say that I have a propensity for frustration. So somebody in the kitchen is, whether it's at work or at home, is banging the dishes, and I have this thought of frustration. Oh, Bob's always so noisy. He's never considerate of anybody. So I make the same choice, and I will, choose to have the same thoughts inside of my head. So then I take the same actions and behavior, which maybe I'm a bit aloof with this person because I'm kind of secretly ticked off at them. I think they're so rude. So then I have the same experience. They're sort of, they isolate themselves from me, and they're very standoffish with me. So then I have to get the same feeling that nobody really accepts me in my family or in my workplace, which then reinforces that same thought. So now I have that same thought of judgment or frustration. Rude, ignorant people, they don't appreciate me. So I make the same choice. I'll continue to have my thoughts of judgment, or I'll ignore them, or I won't make the effort to be supportive. Then I have the same experience. My coworkers or my family are aloof, they're standoffish, they don't support me, so I have the same feeling. And so we go on this loop in our brain and our body and our nervous system. And what happens is every thought creates a chemical in our body. All our thoughts and emotions, they create chemistry in our body. And the thoughts and emotions of stress are adrenaline, cortisol. And just like your body gets addicted to caffeine or alcohol or nicotine, do you think it's possible that our bodies get affected and addicted to the hormones of stress? 100%. So we get addicted to the thoughts and the hormones of a stressful experience. So whether it's the emotions of anger or judgment or fear or rage or any of those, or guilt, we actually get addicted to those. But here's the challenge. So this little picture at the bottom here is a picture of the little neurons in your brain making a connection. Anytime you learn something, you start to learn things, your brain makes connections. These neurons make connections. So whether you're learning how to do something, you're learning theory, or you're learning on this webinar today, your brain is changing and starting to make connections, right? So let's use the example of tying our shoe. When we first learned to tie our shoe as a young child, it's difficult, it's messy, it takes a long time, doesn't work so well. Why? Because there's no neural pathway in the brain. These connections have not been made. So after a few times of tying your shoe, it becomes easier and easier. Why? Because now there's a neural pathway in the brain. And the more you tie your shoe, the stronger the pathway gets. It's like driving your vehicle through a field. The first time you drive through, you're going to make tracks. And the next time you drive through, you'll make a deeper track, and then a deeper track, and then a deeper track, and the ruts will get deeper and deeper and deeper. Does that make sense? So these tracks will get stronger and stronger and stronger. And now I think we could all actually tie our shoe while we're talking to somebody about, the hockey game last night. Is that not true? So the question becomes then, who's tying our shoe? Your body is the unconscious mind is tying the shoe. So what I want you to understand is the body as the unconscious mind. Just like we can be unconsciously competent with tying our shoe, we can become unconsciously competent about getting into a stress response, getting into fear, getting into lack, getting into being a victim, getting into powerlessness, or all the things that people do that certainly are absolutely the opposite of innovation. So I am covering some very pretty deep concepts here in a very short period of time. So I want to make you all know that any of you can contact me anytime, and I'm glad to chat with you further. So in the stress response, human beings shut off from their prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is what makes us human beings. It's where our higher intelligence resides. So stress shuts us off from our prefrontal cortex. It shuts us off from our higher intelligence. That is the part of the brain that where we'll have empathy, we'll have insight, we'll be able to regulate our emotions, regulate our fear. It's where we have our morality, our intuition. It's where we'll see the big picture. It's where we have our creativity. And so I think you're getting the picture here. If we're deeply in the stress response, and by the way, we can put people into the stress response in our workplace by overworking them, putting them on production deadlines, not sharing information with them, keeping them in the unknown. This all puts human beings into the stress response. It shuts them down from their higher thinking centers. They will definitely be more likely to make mistakes in the stress response. They're more likely to be selfish like an animal. They're going to be more likely to fight. So you'll see more harassment. You'll see more anger outbursts. Or like an animal, they might hide. So you'll have people that'll quit. They'll get sick. They'll stay home. And so I didn't know this either. I was raised as a farm girl. I had no brothers. The only time I got approval that's my interpretation as a kid, is when I worked hard. So I just thought, like, we're way more valuable. The harder we work, the more valuable we are. And I did not understand that working harder and pushing people for productivity, past what they can manage. I had no idea how counterproductive this is to our workplaces, but also to our own selves in our health and well-being. I hope I'm making sense. I have a very short time, as I said, to try and get these things across. So bottom line, if we're like most people, having those constant thoughts of stress, right? Traffic jams, getting kids homeschooled, do I have a job, finances, all those things, we're living in the stress response 70% of the time. That stress response is not only down-regulating our intelligence, but it's also down-regulating our health and down-regulating our gene expression. Okay, and again, this is a new field of epigenetics. So if you research this on the internet, you will absolutely find where people will say this is quackery. And if you research down enough, you will find where it's actually true. So it took 4,000 published studies that smoking was bad for you before the FDA actually said smoking is bad for you. Why? Because there was billions and billions of dollars at stake, right? So if we learn how powerful we are and how powerful our own body is to not only create and innovate, but to even in our own health, there's a lot of very large corporations that stand to lose a lot of money. So I'm just, now is the time to be wise. Now is the time to be asking questions. Now is the time to be doing our own research. So here's twins. They can have the very same DNA. One gets cancer, one does not. Why is that? They have the same DNA. Well, we now know through epigenetics that 95% of our gene expression is the environment. So 95% of our gene expression is the environment. So just because we have a propensity for heart disease or diabetes or cancer in our family, that does not mean we will express it. What is more likely to express it is the environment. So what's that? That's toxins, it's trauma, and it's our emotions, the emotions that we're producing, and it's largely our emotions. So if we have one sister that's much more optimistic. Things roll off this person. They can have a very different gene expression than one who's very high strung, worried all the time, etc. So again, my deepest desire is for you to be curious. Don't believe anything I say. Be curious. Go and do your own research. If you want a little reading list for me, I'm more than happy to give you one. Okay, this is also really interesting to think about. So we all have a cell phone, right? So if you look at your cell phone right now, you will see there's information there, right? So we know that we're not connected to any sort of a cord anymore, but information comes into our cell phone. So then we know we can accept the fact that that cell phone must be carrying a frequency, obviously, right? And that frequency must be carrying information because we see things in our cell phone. We see videos and pictures and words and music. So frequency, even though just because you can't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. So frequency carries information. Okay, so our emotions are a frequency and they can be measured. This is scientifically, you can measure emotions. Okay, how is it that you walk in a room where people are really angry? Have you ever walked into a room where people are really angry and hostile? Haven't you ever said it was palpable? You could feel it? Or you walk into a room where people are in joy, you know, you've just won a huge contract, or other really great news is, if you walk into those two different rooms, you're going to feel totally different, right? What are you feeling? Emotions emit a frequency, and that frequency carries information, and that information is informing our cells, and specifically the cell wall. And that is what has an impact on either upregulating our genes for health and wellness, or possibly downregulating for illness and disease. So if you look at the numbers on the left-hand side here, you can see everything below those survival emotions that are below the heart. Survival emotions below the heart. So greed, lust, rage, anger, guilt, shame. Those are all emotions that are more likely to downregulate us over time. And who do you know that lives primarily in some of these emotions all the time? You know somebody that you have to walk on eggshells around them. They're always kind of uptight, right? Or you have that person that they're always kind and they're always optimistic, and they're always positive, genuinely, right? So I love this information, because if we want to live a long and healthy life, it pays to be nice, right? It pays for us to deal with our stuff. So whatever has happened to us in our life that makes us angry or resentful or short-tempered, or any of those emotions that we have as a human being, this new understanding of how our immune systems work, this new model of science now, we're all self-interested, and there's nothing wrong with that. People are most interested in themselves. So if we know that being an autocratic leader is really only hurting ourselves and our own health, well, maybe that's going to encourage us to chill out and deal with our stuff, and work on being more patient, more understanding, more cooperative with our teams, and so on. Okay, so this is the British Journal of Medical Psychology. 3 10-year studies concluded that emotional stress was more predictive of death from cancer and cardiovascular disease than from smoking. People who were unable to effectively manage their stress had 40% higher death rates than non-stressed people. So we all know stress is bad for us. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And I don't think any of this is anything that is probably crazy. You're probably saying, oh, that kind of makes sense. But I think we have permission to go and look at some of these basic fundamentals that are yet so powerful on how we manage through these challenging times, especially whether we're innovating personally for our family, or we need to innovate in our organizations. Over 1/2 of heart disease cases were not explained by the standard risk factors as high cholesterol, smoking, or sedentary lifestyle. So I didn't explicitly say it, but a person in the stress response over extended period of time you know, they are having, you know, the higher blood pressure, the constricted arteries and so on. Also, so does that make sense? Then you're going to be more likely to have our heart disease and strokes and things like that, right? Cardiovascular events, because the cardiovascular system is under so much stress, so much pressure. The more things are in pressure, the more likely it's likely to burst or to break or to wear down. Yes? And the other thing is, when this constant adrenaline is going through our body all the time, that adrenaline catabolizes tissue, right? And so that's why you'll have a sore back, or you're tight and you feel your muscles are all tight. Well, that tells you that there's lots of adrenaline coursing through your muscles. It makes them stiff and hard and catabolizes them. So what does this then mean for you from what we've discussed so far? You know, maybe you want to think about, what is your frequent flyer low level emotion? For me, I used to complain a lot, right? For those of you that are running a business, you know that it's not always easy. And a few years ago, about the same time my sister was diagnosed, my business wasn't doing that hot. And I would complain a lot. And once to my close confidants, my mom, and once I understand how my emotions really affect my thought process, my ability to create, my ability to solve my problems, once I understood that, I never complained ever again, ever. And even when people would say, how's it going? And if I had the crappiest day, I would say, it's going great. I would, you know, force myself to not go down that, you know, negative side of my thought process. Because once I started thinking about my challenging day, then I would feel the rush of the emotion of my challenging day. Then I'd feel sorry for myself, which would just like cause my brain to just not function very well. And I would just get on this loop again. And that was not what I needed to actually get my business to really perform the way I needed it to perform. I hope this is making sense to you. So then, you know, I spent quite a bit of time here, like talking about sort of the context of the why here, because we really need to understand that about why stress is so anti-innovation. It's so unhealthy for us, and we just can't innovate. So let's talk about living in creation or living in innovation. So when we look at this picture on the screen here, isn't this just on the left side how things are today, right? Even myself, I was getting depressed, I was getting angry, I was getting not in a great place, watching the news a lot 6 to 8 months ago. And so I had to stop watching. I had to totally stop watching it because of how it was affecting my thoughts. My thoughts were just taking me places I did not want to go. And I just know that that's not good for my ability to create and show up as my best, as the leader that I really want to be, whether it's in my family or in my personal life. And so how many people are sitting at home like this, right? They're medicating their fear and their anxiety with pills or alcohol. They're numbing their fear, they're numbing their stress or their apathy, or their, you know, we're plugged into Google and eating fast food. And these are all the things that keep us living in survival. This person totally is living in survival. And literally all you have to do literally is get yourself up out of that chair and go for a walk in the park. And literally it will start to shift how your brain and heart is working. It'll start to shift the nervous system. It's better if you can really put your heart in it, put your effort into it. Sometimes we have to force it. You got to fake it till you make it. This person here, if they're addicted to the chemicals of apathy or the chemicals of stress, the chemistry of anxiety, if they're completely addicted to that, if someone comes along and says to them, hey, Johnny, did you know that if you just go out for a walk and just make a list of everything you're grateful for, you can, you know, start seeing more possibility for your life. Just like a drug addict coming off a drug, they're actually going to resist that. Their body literally is not going to want that, because their body, as the mind, is addicted to that chemistry, is addicted to that habit. And so people get stuck in an unconscious program they don't even know they're stuck in. And it's pretty sad. So the key thing is to start to learn really how our brain and nervous system works so we can change it. Not only by that, if this person does this over and over again, just like you get competent at tying your shoe, as I said, we get unconsciously competent in this state of mind. And so not only that, but by the time we're 35 years old, I want to slow down so you hear this, a approximately 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 is a set of unconscious, memorized emotional reactions, habits, things that we've just learned from our environment, right? So, and it's all running unconsciously. And so now we try and change and we say, hey, you know what? I can live a way better life if I start being more positive, if I get out and exercise, if I actually take a walk, if I actually stop listening to the news, if I actually start envisioning a positive future, I can actually have a better life, right? But you're trying to get 5% of your conscious mind change 95% of what is running unconsciously, and the unconscious is measured at approximately 1 million times more powerful. So you think about the magnification of the magnitude of what I'm saying. We have a population that is programmed right now into fear. It's constantly about fear, and people are losing their power more and more because they're getting more fearful. You know, I really believe that if somebody really cared about what's going on, they would be teaching us about how to upregulate our immune systems. Why don't we spend some time talking about that every day on the news? Spend even, okay, maybe 45 minutes is negative, but maybe 15 minutes is here's the thing that we can do to make ourselves feel better. I'm not sure what's going on, but something doesn't feel right to me. And I'm no longer afraid to say that because I understand how control works and how fear works. So here's Nelson Mandela, and he was in jail for 30 years, angry man, right? Angry man and locked in prison. How on earth did he get out of jail and not only that, but run the country? And if you read his autobiography, he had to have a new thought. He had to have a new thought. So he was angry, he was enraged at the injustice, but there came a time where he started, you know, and thinking to himself, I will never get out of here, I will never get out of here. And then one day he had a new thought and he said to himself, what if I could get out of here? What if I could get out of here? So he had to have a new thought. So if you think about this guy here, you know, you have to have a new thought. You would have to get out of your conditioned thought process to have a new thought. So he said to himself, what if I could get out of here? And as he started asking himself that question, his frontal, asking a frontal lobe question, the frontal lobe, when you ask it a good question, I always say the quality of my life is directly related to the quality of the questions I ask myself. So he asked himself a good frontal lobe question. Your brain has to give you a good answer. Your brain has to give you an answer that's, on par with the quality of the question that you're asking. So, his brain will go and do this search all through the layers of its, its whole parts of the brain. And it came back and it said, you know what, I'm going to start writing letters of apartheid United States. So then he started writing letters on apartheid United States, and he started to get some action, right? So then he had another thought. He said, okay, well, if I could get out of here, who's going to lead this country? He asked himself another really good question. If I could get out of here, who is going to lead this country? And when you ask yourself a really good question, the universe, your brain, like whatever that is, there's an intelligence that has to respond to that question. And so he said, what if I could lead this country? And the next thing he said to himself, well, if I was to lead this country, who would I have to be to lead this country? I can't be this angry, negative person. So it was a series of him asking questions and possibility that started for him to innovate himself out of that circumstance, and not only that, but lead the country. And it's not just possible for him, it's possible for all of us. His nervous system works no different than our nervous system. And that's really, really exciting. So this is a person in anxiety, in fear, in anger, in judgment, in shame, in victimization, in frustration, and being mad in traffic, mad at internet connections, mad at the government, mad at your neighbor, whatever. This is a person whose brain is not working very well. They're not going to be very intelligent. They're not going to make good decisions. They're not going to see the future. They're not going to innovate. They're going to fight over toilet paper and all the things we see people do. So when I saw people fighting over toilet paper and people were laughing at them last spring, I didn't laugh. I said, like, wow, with compassion, like, wow, those people are scared. Those are people in fear, right? So what we want to be is we have to slow down our nervous system. We have to slow down our brain waves, and we have to get that heart and brain coherent. We have to get these two massively important organs connected and working. And this what makes us like we are super intelligent. Like we truly have supernatural propensities, but we are never taught it and we're never given permission to use them. And I'm here as a walking, talking, living example that I know this is true, because I've seen it, what happened with my own family and what's happened as I've transformed my business into, totally different situation, which I'm super thankful for. So these are the emotions of living in survival versus living in creation. So in survival, we're creating breakdown and disease in our body. In creation, we're up-regulating for health and longevity. So in fear, in survival, we're more egocentric. And in creation, we're ego-less. We're more cooperative, compassion, more about the whole, all of that. So also, if you put people in fear like they are right now, they're more likely to be selfish. They're more likely to be self-centered. Even though we're good people and we have propensities to care about our neighbors, we're gonna be more tempted not to if we're in fear, right? And so now is the time more than ever for people to understand how this works. We have to take control of our internal state. We must take control of our internal state so that we can be the best for our family, the best for our neighbor, the best leader that we can be. That's what I have to say about that. Okay, Happiness Advantage, written by Sean Anker, is a really awesome book. You can also look at his talks on TED Talks. They're really interesting. They're great to share with your people. Doctors in a positive state make an accurate diagnosis 19% faster. Why would that be? Because they have access to the frontal lobe of their brain, and actually they're more intelligent and they're working better. Optimistic salespeople outsell pessimistic ones by 56%, and happy people are 31% more intelligent, right? So how do you have people make bad choices? Scare the heck out of them. Wouldn't want people to be really happy because then they might just not follow the status quo, right? So take your power back, do what makes you happy, be happy, take the time to do what you need to do to get your body out of stress. There's a reason why Harvard Business Review has complete editions of their magazine dedicated now to the neuroscience of business, because they're understanding that whether it's meditation or yoga or walking in nature or taking your holidays or knowing when to turn your workday off, the most productive, innovative, powerful people are the ones who actually understand how stress really impacts our performance and can self-regulate that. Okay, in a study of 5,716 middle-aged people, those with the highest self-regulation abilities, meaning they can self-regulate their emotions, were over 50 times more likely to be alive without chronic disease 15 years later than those with the lowest self-regulation scores. This is Science of the Heart from the Heart Math Institute. So us being able to regulate, even for myself, don't you think I get frustrated? Yes. Don't you think I get fearful? 100%. But it's the faster I can notice that I'm doing that, and the faster I can force myself out of that bad mindset. About a month ago, I was feeling really down in the dumps. I was feeling lonely, like I live by myself. I was feeling isolated. I was getting really angry. And in the mail came my little pictures from my kids I sponsor, with a foster parents plan. And there's this 2 little boys with their ragged little shorts and their ragged little t-shirts and their bare feet. And they were playing with this rusty piece of an old car part. And that just jolted my thought process right out of my self-victimization and into gratitude, right? And I was so thankful for that, because it shifted me out of my crappy mindset that's really not healthy for me or anybody else. So I promised you that I would talk a little bit about how do we innovate and lead from the incoming future. And this is another whole conversation. And we're wrapping up here. I will wrap up here in 3 minutes. So MIT, which is a very credible organization, has an offshoot called the Presencing Institute. And there's something called U theory. If you've heard of it, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't heard of it, you might want to look into it. So Google understands this and uses it. Lots of successful Steve Jobs understood this. He said, people don't know what they want until I tell them what they want. And so they are actually bringing the science of how do you read the incoming future? How do you know when it comes to innovation, how do you know what the world is going to need before we actually need it? Like I said, anything that we develop now from our past, anything we develop now based on what we already know is going to come from the past and create more of the past. So if we're looking for solutions, innovations, things that are answers to our environmental challenges and our population challenge and all those things, those are going to come from an evolving future. And how do you read that future? So it's called, how do I explain this the best? So it's called U theory. And in order to do that, you have to suspend judgment, suspend doubt. You have to be in the present moment. You have to be observing patterns without judgment, without any analysis. You just observe, 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 and then you look for patterns. So you notice what you notice as it's incoming. It's like Sherlock Holmes putting what you notice on the wall, standing back with your brain waves out of high beta brain waves down into a, an alpha sort of brain wave. And you're reading intuitively the patterns, and you put the patterns together and you start to see what the incoming future needs. And some of you will know what I'm talking about. But if you notice, the opposite of that is the old model, which is where most people are. We're trying to solve our problems in fear, in hate, in anger, in a closed mind, and we're only going to get more of the past. So I don't feel I can really do this slide justice, but I'm out of time. My main goal here was just to open you up to this idea, to let you know this exists and to go do your own research. So I'd like to give you an example. So Chip Wilson, Lululemon, you will hear him in his interviews. He gives a really good example of this. So he's created, a multi-billion-dollar successful organization, and he started creating yoga gear before yoga was even a thing. But he talks about the fact that one day he was going about some errands and he noticed there was a poster on a telephone pole about a yoga class, and he just noticed it. And then shortly later, he was having coffee at a cafe and he overheard some ladies talking about yoga. And then sometime, around that time, he's reading the newspaper and he saw yoga show up again. And he saw that 3 times. And so I knew yoga was going to be a thing. I knew yoga was going to be a thing. So now let me ask you this. If he was angry, if he was frustrated, if he was distracted, if he was mad at his neighbor, mad at his kids, would he have noticed that poster on the pole? Would he have been present to overhear what those people are saying? So when we're in fear, we don't see possibility. Anger, frustration, living in our past, we don't see possibility. And so, like Einstein said, we can't solve our problems with the same mind that created them. And so as human beings, we like the known, we like safety, and we will take the uncomfortable known typically rather than launching into an unknown future, especially if we're in high stress for sure. But like Nelson Mandela, like Chip Wilson, you can start to see patterns, you can start to see possibility, and we can start to see new paths. But we have to get out of that stress response. We have to be in the present moment. We cannot have cultures of stress in our organizations. We have to be creating cultures of gracefulness, cultures of kindness, cultures of cooperation, cultures of, doesn't mean you don't have hard work, but it means there's sweetness with that work. So what are 3 things that you can do? Well, I think this is a question that you should ask yourself, really. You need to ask yourself, what are 3 things that you can do, because everybody's different. But I do have 3 things here. Number 1, you have to learn this. Like if you are resonating with what I'm saying to you, go about your business to learn it. There is lots of information out there. You must learn it, because we have an unconscious habit that would rather us not learn it. So because we like the known and change, we don't like change and all that stuff. So you got to learn for yourself, whether you're a leader or not. Then if we're leaders, first we have to learn it, we have to embody it ourselves. Then we have to know it well enough we can actually teach people. So I teach this to my people. We talk about this all the time. And then the more I understand it, the more I am able as a leader to create the environment for the culture of innovation to be fostered. So what is a culture of innovation? It's a culture where you welcome people's ideas. It's a culture where you have a rhythm of working that's not stressing people out and having them in anxiety, right? We started to create a happiness committee at Run Life, right? And again, I didn't know these things. So I don't think we should beat ourselves up. When we know better, we do better. So in summary, most people in business are living in the stress response 70% of the time. Unfortunately, it becomes a habit. We even create businesses of habit that are habitually aggressive, habitually stressful. It's a self-perpetuating cycle of downward cycle. We don't see possibility. So we can live in creation. It is required for innovation. It requires awareness in the present moment. It requires us to be aware of what we're letting us rob us of our joy, put us in stress and fear. It causes us to actually have to make conscious choices. Even though that person ticked me off, I'm going to choose not to be upset at them. I'm going to choose to maybe wonder what's going on for them. We have to discipline ourselves to get into an inspired emotion on a regular basis. And when we do that, then we actually, like Nelson Mandela, we start to see possibility. Like Chip Wilson, we start to see possibility. And when we see possibility and we're in a higher emotion, we trust ourselves more and we actually trust the unknown more. And the incoming future, if we want to be reading the incoming future and know what to do, it is read in the present moment. So depression is, worry about the past. Anxiety is worry about the future. So depression, we're living in the past. Typically, anxiety, we're sort of living in the future and being scared of that. So to be able to be our utmost and our best, we have to be in the present moment. So that's it for me. We've got 8 minutes left for questions.
And if anybody else has, we have one other question. Any tips on how to shift a negative organizational culture?
So now we understand why that's so hard, right? Because organizational culture is just a group of people with all their habits, all their unconscious habits and belief systems over time that become who they are, and they don't even realize that's who they are, right? And if you heard what I said, which is true, 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of unconscious belief systems, unconscious memorized emotional reactions, unconscious thoughts, unconscious, right? So I didn't even know, like, for example, me and my business, I did not have a neural network for building a multi-million-dollar business. That's not how I was. So if unconsciously I didn't believe that, because that's not how I was raised, does it make sense that subconsciously I'm gonna try and sabotage myself out of that? Because that's not congruent with the belief systems how I was raised. Because unconsciously, coming from struggle when I was raised on the farm and all that stuff. So we unconsciously create all these problems. So you have all these people in your workplace that have all these unconscious beliefs going on, right? And so that's why, and I feel that I need to say this, even though it's a kind of a shameless plug. That's why I can teach the model for change. Dr. Joe Dispenza has a corporate training program called NeuroChangeSolutions. And he teaches it. It's for corporations. So you can actually teach your people the model and help them understand how they can really have victory over, the things that rob them of their own joy, right? That's not very happy being how I was, right? So I had to realize that's what I was doing. And so I know this is a long-winded answer, but it really sucked that I lost my sister. Like, it's the most horrible thing ever. However, the silver lining was that I would never be where I am today if that hadn't happened to her. I'm not sure I would have learned that. I'm not sure I would have learned how we actually work. So your people have no hope, honestly, if they don't understand how their brain and nervous system works and how we are unconscious in a program that we don't even like. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of great information. And I have a few other ones that, again, going to the mindset of top leadership when it comes to understanding that innovation and why that's important. How do you gauge their progress and understanding? I'm just going to see if I have a.
That's pretty simple. It's very simple. You know where someone is at based on how they show up, period. How they show up. So the more I become in line with who I really am and the highest potential for myself. Doesn't mean I'm not a strong personality. Doesn't mean I don't turn some people off, because not everybody likes everybody. But you gauge their progressive understanding by how they show up. How fast can I react and from a negative situation into possibility and positive? If somebody irritates me, how fast and how can I show up to be as I might need to be firm, but kind and productive, as possible. By your fruits you shall know them, right? Period. Talk is cheap. How people really show up, their essence, how they are.
And what they bring to the table. And I think this will be the last question we'll be able to, I'm just going to get to this one and then we'll close off. How do you get an overloaded employee base to shift in innovative behaviors? Everyone says they're too busy to innovate.
First, they need information, right? You've got to give them facts first. Give them facts, right? I had no idea that someone can get addicted to the hormones of adrenaline. I had no idea. And I would sort of show up late everywhere. I had no idea that my body needed that little hit. And I even noticed this once for myself as well. So, starting and running a business isn't easy. And I just am really honest, because if I can be honest, then hopefully maybe other people will be honest with themselves. So I noticed one time that one employee like really ticked me off, and I was really upset. Not like I didn't yell at them or anything, but after I, really told them what I thought, I walked away and felt like, oh, I feel so much better. I must be right, because I feel so much better. But now I realize, that was just my addiction to, getting a little hit of chemical, right? I totally see that now, where I totally did not see it then, right? So you have to give people facts first. You have to give them a basis for understanding. That's the kindest thing we can do, is because we're not educated on this at all. We are educated the opposite way.
Yeah. Well, merci, Theo. Always a pleasure to have you present for us, for sharing your great insights, and for everybody for joining us today. So we are wishing you a wonderful weekend. Hopefully the sun comes out this weekend. Bonne journée, stay safe and healthy. All the best to you.